Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Launchpad. My name is Zach Aubert. I'm the founder and CEO of TLP Network, and here at the Launchpad, it's our mission to inform and inspire the explorers of tomorrow because we believe that space is better together. And today, I'm joined by Jeremy Graeber from NASA. Jeremy was the assistant launch director for Artemis 1 and chief of the test launch and recovery operations branch within Exploration Ground Systems. Jeremy, it's a privilege to speak to you today.
Hey, Zach, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. And, just excited to talk about Artemis 1 and the amazing opportunity that we had and yeah, just ready to go.
Awesome. Well, you've had quite the journey with NASA. Could you share a little bit about your history with the agency and what your current and most recent role was?
Sure, no problem. So I started at the Kennedy Space Center working for the main shuttle contractor, United Space Alliance, and that was my first job out of college. I started in the fuel cell and cryogenics group and really focused right when I started all the way at the bottom, working on the ground systems, working on all of the capabilities that were necessary to service the fuel cell systems on board the shuttle orbiters out at the launch pad. And so I got to learn everything about that. And I got a lot of really great experience to understand how everything works out here at the Space Center. And then I had the opportunity to move into working on the actual spacecraft hardware on the orbiters and was eventually the lead fuel cell and cryogenics engineer for OV-105 Space Shuttle Endeavour. And what that did is it allowed me to be a part of the detailed testing that we needed to do through each of those orbiter flows. And I also was lucky enough to be a part of the launch team for Space Shuttle Endeavour launches. And through that, I learned a whole lot. I learned a lot about how the overall launch operation is conducted. I got to work in close proximity to the NASA test directors that implemented and executed those launch countdown operations in delegated authority from the launch director. Learned a lot about that, and that really kind of gave me a chance in 2004 to move over to the NASA test director's office in the shuttle program. So that's when my NASA specific career started. Once I got there, I really found that was my home. That's the type of work that I really wanted to be a part of. I learned a ton about the bigger integrated picture of how a launch is actually put together, how you integrate and orchestrate all of that work so that everything is set up, ready to go when you get to the terminal count portion of launch countdown. Did that for many years, and I'm essentially still kind of doing that similar kind of work. Just kind of my responsibilities have grown over time. Had the chance to be the launch NASA test director for STS-132 as the shuttle program was finishing up, and also got to be a part of the Ares 1X launch team as part of the Constellation program. That was a really interesting mission to go be a part of. Learned a lot about first time missions, how to build up a launch team that was specific to a new launch vehicle, which hadn't been done for many, many years. So that was really great training and development for me as it relates to Artemis 1 and the path that we took there. In the 2014 timeframe, I had the opportunity to be the NASA recovery director for the Exploration Flight Test 1 mission for the Orion spacecraft. And so I was leading the recovery operations out off the coast of San Diego, out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, doing that first recovery of a early Orion spacecraft. That again helped teach me a whole lot of things as it relates to a new program, a new vehicle, and new operations. And then everything since then has been Artemis 1 and the path to that. And as you mentioned, I had the great pleasure to be a part of the launch team and be the assistant launch director supporting Charlie Blackwell Thompson, our launch director, in everything Artemis 1 related for launch. So that's a quick summary of what I've been up to in my career.
Quite a career journey, starting kind of, as you said, right on the kind of the ground of it, coming into NASA, and then kind of working your way all the way up to second in command for a launch, which is, I think, really amazing and inspiring for kids that, we kind of need everybody, but just because you start at one point doesn't mean you can't grow within it and do more. Looking at all the programs you were part of, was there maybe a part of each one that you said you enjoyed the most or found the most personally challenging through Shuttle, Constellation, and now Artemis?
What I would say is, yeah, part of each one. The thing that I think that I carry the most out of all of the opportunities that I've had is the teams that we built to go successfully do these amazing missions and operations, because really that's what it takes. And that's one of the things that I love so much about my job, love so much about NASA, is we really have a really great handle on how to develop teams, how to pull the right people together, make sure we're listening to all the right voices as we move through these very complex, challenging, hazardous operations. And it is really, that's where I feel the most comfortable. And that's when I look back, of course, the exciting parts of those missions are kind of the primary memories, but the things that are just below that are the relationships and the teams that were built in all of those hours and days, months, weeks, years leading up to that operation, and those close relationships and working with those folks that were a part of those teams. That's the part that I carry with me and am most proud of, and really remember the fondest memories for.
Absolutely. Well, just a few months ago, the world stopped and watched as NASA's next generation mega moon rocket, the SLS, launched for the first time, really starting that journey back to the moon, returning humans to the surface of the moon. As the assistant launch director, as you said, it was a journey of weeks, months, and years to get there. Can you take us through what that was like when you actually joined on the Artemis program, and what it was like getting to the point of, maybe just a few months before countdown? What was the training and rehearsals and building that team like?
So I'll kind of reference the way I came into NASA in the first place. I came into the space shuttle program right in the middle, year 15. I had the pleasure to be a part of that program for 15 years of my career. And what I realized in going through that part of my career and then being a part of Artemis is the amazing work that had been done in the 15 years before I got into the space shuttle program. What it takes to go build everything that you need to be able to successfully go launch a massive Artemis rocket it's an amazing amount of work, and you have to go build that from the beginning, whether it's the flight hardware, whether it's the command and control system that you're going to utilize to command that flight vehicle, all of the ground systems, and especially for the launch team, it's that launch team that you're going to build. And so ensuring that we had all of the capabilities that launch team was going to need to be able to monitor their systems and be able to give good recommendations for if there are issues or challenges along the way in their system, so that we can safely and efficiently work through those operations. And so we had to start at the beginning. Now, we learned a ton of things through all of the different missions that NASA has been a part of since its inception, but each individual mission, like Artemis, has got its own specifics that you need to go account for and develop and practice. And so that's really where I came in early on, and that was working on building up the foundation and leading up to those last couple of months prior to launch. That really, we were continuing to do that, and even now we are continuing to take that foundation and add more to it, fill in places where we could where we had lessons learned, and add more capabilities onto that foundation. And so that really is the experience of moving through really about the last 10 years getting to the Artemis 1 launch. And again, the great success that we had back in November.
Yeah, it was an amazing morning watching it. I was 3 miles away at the Saturn V Center, and it was quite the morning. couple attempts to get there, but we got there in the end, and it worked perfectly.
Absolutely.
Prior to launch, SLS went through a series of wet dress rehearsals and seemed at times to maybe struggle to get certified ready for launch. Can you talk about how these multiple rehearsals affected your team, how they maybe have helped streamline the process for future SLS rockets? What learns were there on your guys' side for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that I kind of already touched on is the specific implementation for every mission, right? So from one point of view, there are a lot of capabilities that we were utilizing as a part of the Artemis mission that we have experience with, right? So the engines, we have experience from the space shuttle program, the solid rocket boosters. They're slightly different, one additional segment, but very similar to what we used in shuttle. Much of what is within the core stage has roots back to the external tank. But there's a whole lot of new implementation for those systems, as well as completely new things. The interim cryo propulsion stage is new to this implementation for us. Everything related to Orion, all new capabilities. So taking all of those, putting them together, and then understanding how they work together in conjunction with the ground systems that interface with them is very critical. And you can do all the planning, you can do all the analysis, you can do all of the development you want, but until you go run those tests against that hardware in the configuration that you need for launch, you're not going to find everything. And when you look at the progression that we worked through the wet dress rehearsals, the launch attempts, and finally the successful launch in November, each time we were learning how our system works together and finding the best way to go operate that system so that we meet all of our requirements and we can safely launch. And that's really what we did. And when you think about this in, I don't know, maybe in your everyday life, you're never going to implement something new that you're doing correctly, perfectly the first time you do it. You're going to have a learning curve. And so that's really what we worked through. Now think about that in a massively complicated, huge, most powerful rocket ever launched, right? We had to work through that and understand how that system works collectively, and then learn from it, make adjustments, test those adjustments, learn some more, and ultimately get to that successful launch in November.
Absolutely, so much learning along the way, and as you said, you'll never perfectly do everything the first time. As you got through that critical tanking test, that last major test before we went into kind of the final launch prep and first launch attempt, what was that like for you, for your team? Was there a moment that it kind of finally hit of, oh, we're actually going to go into a launch attempt? This isn't a rehearsal. We're going to try to go back to the moon now for real?
What I would say is the team, our launch team, and all of the players that are involved with each one of those wet dresses, and then for the tanking test, we all knew and understood that we had all the tools and all the smarts to figure out how to successfully and safely fill the core stage and the ICPS. It was just a matter of time and a matter of patience and a matter of due diligence to understand and put that right methodology in place. And so really when we got to the tanking test, I think we had found all of those things that we knew we needed to implement. And we were highly confident when we went into the tanking test that this was going to really demonstrate the way this was going to work. And so it was not a surprise to us. It was very much a validation of the hard work and blood, sweat, and tears that was put into those weeks through those wet dresses to really go demonstrate, yep, we have figured out how this is going to need to work. And then the team was very much ready to take that next step and be ready for that next launch attempt. And thankfully, we were able to get to that. Obviously, there was a little storm that blew through for us right in the middle of that. And and again, our team did a fantastic job working through that situation as well, and had a great launch on November 16th.
Thinking about those first launch attempts, we know the timelines got shifted around a little bit before we came back for the next set after the storm. Were there any specific learns for maybe the actual operations of your team or the types of communications you guys did inside mission control from the first round of launch attempts to the second that you learned because you had actually gone through the first attempts? Obviously, there's lots of rehearsals prior, though, as you've said.
So I would say not from a communications perspective. Our team had trained for years, multiple launch countdown and cryo loading simulations where we inject different problems and issues and train our teams on how we communicate and how we work through any issues or challenges that come up during a launch countdown. We are always learning, right? Every opportunity that we're in the control room working together, regardless of what it's for, we are learning lessons and we're trying to hone our craft, hone all of those skills. And so that's just an ongoing thing that we always do. The key things that were really that we needed to focus on was exactly how that interface at the tail service mast umbilical, where the liquid hydrogen goes on board the core stage. We really just needed to understand the configuration that we needed for the ground systems and the flight side to ensure that we didn't get a leak that would put us outside of our limits. Once we understood exactly that configuration from a pressure and a temperature perspective, that really was the key to getting us to a successful and safe loading and our next launch attempt.
And if I understand correctly, Shuttle actually had some similar processes in its early days of finding just that balance of the ground systems and the actual flight hardware. And then once you found it, it was much smoother.
Absolutely. Yep.
So looking at the actual launch itself, all call to stations in November, right around the 48, 46 hour mark. What were those 2 days like for you? I feel like that's kind of a mystery to a lot of people, what all call and that process into, the final kind of couple hours is like. Could you take us through that?
Sure. So for our team, we've got folks that are very specifically trained and focused on different kind of sections of the launch countdown timeframe. So as we roll into call to stations, there's a whole group of folks who are very focused on the work that is necessary from that point on. And it really takes you through the configuration of the ground systems, Orion, the SLS aspects, and we incrementally work our way through. The part that's really, I think, sometimes hard for folks to understand is the reason we have the work laid out the way we do is so that, because we only have a 2-hour launch window. So everything has to be orchestrated so that you can get all the work you need, all the right configuration, everything in place so that when the opening of that window comes up, you have everything ready and your team can say, give the launch director, give Charlie, or go for launch. And that is orchestrated all the way back to that call to stations that's a couple of days prior to that that planned T0 for launch. So throughout that entire process, there are teams through every 8, 10, 12-hour shift that are focused on the work in front of them. And the way we like to look at it is those teams have their launch that they're aiming for. And that really is, did we get everything done on our shift on time and hand it off to the next shift so that they are on time and can hand off an on time and a completed work to the next shift? Because every delay on each one of every hour that's delayed or minute that's delayed in any of that 2 days could have an impact on whether or not we're ready to launch at the opening of that window. So for me personally, it's consistent and ongoing monitoring of how that work is going. So I was here for many hours on the day prior to launch. and really just staying engaged to understand any issues that are coming up and how that might impact us on the following day. For those of us that are on the terminal count side of launch, we have to go to bed, and it doesn't matter when we are tired. We got to go to bed when it makes sense, so that we're ready to be on console. And for this particular launch at very early in the morning, that's a little more challenging. But through the years of doing this, it's pretty straightforward. You just set yourself up. You get sleep when you can. For me personally, coming back the next day, I've said this in other venues, but I have to go get a nice long run in. That helps me to get my mind in the right frame of mind, so that when I come in, I can just focus on the work. And so I come into work, I do a nice run here out on center, and then get a shower, get in, and then it's full on focus of the work and understand status. And then it really is just manage the work, manage the issues, manage any challenges that come up. As the assistant launch director, my main job is to make sure that Charlie has everything that she needs, whatever that might be. Every day, every shift, every launch attempt, that's a different set of content that I'm on the hook for. And so it's being flexible, having a broad knowledge, understanding of what could go wrong, what could impact us, where we could be late, and trying to think ahead of those things and make sure that she's got what she needs to be able to make the best possible decisions, because ultimately she is the launch authority, and she makes those big decisions, and it's up to me to make sure that I give her everything I possibly can to allow her to make the best decision each and every time. So that's kind of the behind the scenes on what it was like for me, and kind of where my head is on launch day.
It's really interesting to hear, because I think we've heard it from some interviews during Apollo and then Shuttle of everyone has their kind of ways of getting focused and getting into that set, and just being able to kind of hunker down and do the work that needs to be done in that moment. And I think, like anyone that works in the space industry, we understand the clock does not orbit around a normal time schedule. You work when space works, and that's how we go.
Absolutely.
One of those big decisions that Charlie ultimately had to make on November 15th was sending up the red team to the pad. Something that I think most of the public didn't think was even maybe an option, seeing people go out to the pad while propellant was loading and kind of suspended at that point. But it was a very active situation. Can you take us through those events inside Mission Control, and ultimately that decision being made by Charlie, and how kind of all of that played out?
So one of the reasons why that capability existed was because one of the things that is very important to us is to look at things that may cause us issues, and evaluating those and working on different methods to be able to recover from those issues should they come up, and looking at those years and years ahead of when they might actually become challenges. And so the development of the capability for a red crew, we had that capability back in the shuttle program, and it was available. It was a capability back in the Apollo program. That's a historical nature, but again, each one of those implementations is specific to that vehicle and the ground systems and the places that you can access. So we had to go do that same development for Artemis 1 and put a plan together. So we spent years thinking ahead of where could we go, what kind of operations would we be able to do, what kind of resources would we need, what kind of cameras would we need to be able to track those types of individuals. So the years of work that was put into preparing for that, not only that, but also establishing what training those guys would need to have, what equipment they would need to take with them to keep them safe. That all was planned out and put into place. So a ton of work necessary to even have that on the table as an option. In addition to that, having resources like fire rescue and emergency medical in place, set up and ready to go should there be an emergency while a red crew is at the pad. We had to put all the planning for that in as well. So that's taking care of those individuals going inside the launch danger area during while we've got a fully loaded core stage and upper stage. That is not something we take lightly. Charlie is the ultimate and final decision maker on whether or not we will go implement a red crew, and she takes that extremely seriously, and so do I. And so it's very important that we put, and there was hours of discussion and planning and development of what that red crew would be prior to sending that red crew in. And in all reality, the only reasons we would go do a red crew is if we can do it safely, first and foremost. And secondly, that it gives us an opportunity to launch on that day. If it was not going to allow us to launch that day, we wouldn't send those folks and put them at risk. We would fix that outside of that hazardous operation. We would not try an attempt that day, and we would go fix the problem at a different time. So those kind of two key things, safely, and it gives us an opportunity to launch that day. Those things came to bear with this specific problem. Well understood, short time frame to go repair it. We had easy access to it. It was in an area that was deemed acceptable for us to put personnel during this operation, and so thankfully we put that team together. The story came to the launch director. Charlie had a chance to evaluate it, and she made that decision to allow for that red crew to proceed based on a really great set of work that the team put together to plan out that exact method. And then the team went and did a fantastic job of fixing that leak, and it worked exactly the way that we planned it for the exact kind of reason that we would have implemented it. It was essentially a textbook red crew, and it gave us that opportunity to launch that day, which was fantastic. And it's really great. I wish we didn't have to do a red crew, right? Because that is a level of risk that's an increase, but it really does show a payoff to all of the amazing work that the teams did in the years leading up to this launch, to be able to take advantage of it and preserve a launch opportunity on that day that thankfully we were able to go execute.
It's interesting hearing about just the years of prep and obviously the history of Red Team, and then coming into a vehicle that's still so new, and being able to know that you know enough of that vehicle to determine that, yes, it is deemed safe enough to actually send that crew out there. How do you determine, I know you said there was understanding of the vehicle and the situation and easy accessibility. How would you determine the difference of, yes, let's take the risk of doing a red crew versus no, let's scrub for the day and go for the next launch attempt? If it's something that isn't as we have to launch today type of moment, safety first and moving forward, how do you make that determination?
So I would say the safety first is always the primary. Launch is important, but it is not worth taking risk that we should not take, right? So the safety of the personnel is first and foremost. So where the issue is, the specifics of that issue, the ability to quickly egress the area that you need to access, all of those things are factors. There's a laundry list of factors that we evaluate, discuss, put a plan together. And in many cases, and this goes back to the history in shuttle and a lot of the things that I had an opportunity to be a part of, there were many potential red crews that I worked and led the team to go pull together what we would do, how we would do it, where we would go, all of those details that we never actually implemented because we either found rationale that says we don't have to fix it, we can live with it, and it is not a risk to the launch, and we proceeded forward, or it was not something we could fix in the time frame necessary, and therefore we were not going to take the risk of sending those people. So that very well could have been the case in this particular case. If we had, in parallel to planning the red crew, if we had made a determination that said the leak's not big enough to be an impact, it's safe to keep that leak in place and it won't affect the rest of the operations and we can launch. We, even if we could have gone and fixed it, we would not have sent the red crew because it wasn't necessary to launch that day. If it had been, it was a 3-hour job to go do this repair, well, then we would not have been able to launch that day. Again, we would not send the crew and put them at risk when we were not going to have that launch opportunity that day anyway. So again, it's a very small nexus of circumstances that allow you to consider, first and foremost, just to consider sending a red crew. And ultimately, we have to evaluate all of those factors, with safety being the first and foremost, safety of those crews being the foremost. And ultimately, that's the criteria that the launch director, that Charlie, has to evaluate and make that call on.
Very interesting hearing the kind of insights into that of the red crew, because yeah, we don't see it that often, but there's so much planning that does go into it to make sure, as you said, safety is number one priority with any of this. After years of dreaming and building and testing and dedication, 1:47 a.m. local time rolled around and Artemis 1 ignited and actually lifted off the pad. I think Daryl nailed it when he said, "And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond." Still get goosebumps even hearing or saying that. Kicking off this next era of space exploration and an era of SLS flying. Can you take us through those moments of actual liftoff, the point of handoff from launch control to mission control in Houston, and what that was like for the team, but also for you personally? Was there a point that you were able to take a second and turn around and look out the window and actually take in that this is actually going?
Yeah, that was one of the things that's really that was very exciting on that day was that through all of the operations, the testing, the training, most of the opportunities that we train and work through and look at, especially for the terminal count aspect of what we do, most of the training, you have an anomaly or an issue that pops up that you need to react to, and that's what the training's for, right? That is the most critical time frame of everything that we do in Launch Countdown. So we need to be prepared for anything that could happen. And I've explained this to folks that had never been part of a launch team, that launch is typically different than what you do in training, because if you've done everything right and the systems work the way they're supposed to, you launch and everything works. And that's not what you do in training, right? In training, you're working on the things that could go wrong. And so that was one of the best and most satisfying experiences with launch, is to get into terminal count, have all of the ground, flight, command and control systems, all of our communications, everything that was necessary for us to successfully and safely launch Artemis 1 worked exactly the way they were supposed to. And that 10 minutes was 10 minutes of us watching an amazing capability all work together the way it's supposed to, and then ignition. That is it's just magical to see it. You know that you're going to get to that eventually, because that's what launch is all about. But it's great to see it. It's great to be a part of it, and I'm just so proud for the team that pulled that together. And that team is huge, right? That's the team in Firing Room 1 here at Kennedy Space Center in the Launch Control Center. That's the flight control team that's in the Mission Control Center in Houston. That's all of the support organizations, all of the contractors that have supported the development of all these capabilities, all of the suppliers that provide all of the support to those. It's just amazing the reach and extent of what Artemis is, and every single felt that same pride and that kind of just excitement for what was shown at that T0 on the 16th. It was just really an amazing few minutes there, counting down from T-minus 10 minutes.
And it probably went very slow for you, but for us 3 miles away, that last 10 minutes after waiting seemed to go very quickly. But it was an amazing sight to see and feel and hear. It's still something I don't think fully have grasped, actually witnessing something as powerful as SLS and Artemis 1, not only of just a new rocket and a super powerful rocket, but the meaning and the history behind Artemis 1 starting this whole new era. The liftoff happens, we clear the tower. What is the handoff kind of like between launch control to mission control? You've got an active flying, controlled explosion, flying through the air. How does a handoff that seems very difficult to hand off?
So the best part about that is the handoff is automatic, and it is really the ground systems, our ground launch sequencer, and the onboard launch and flight computers onboard SLS. They are really doing everything from T-minus 10 minutes down to launch, and then GLS is done. All of that work is done, and everything is the onboard flight computers on the core stage and ICPS and all of the different aspects, right? So oftentimes the idea of when the vehicle clears the tower, there's a handover. Really, when the solid rocket boosters light, that also initiates the umbilicals to disconnect. All of the umbilicals up and down the tower that are connected to the vehicle. Once those umbilicals disconnect, the ground capabilities are no longer available, right? We're not plugged in anymore. So from that point on, we're flying. And so the mission control team, the flight director in Houston, the ascent flight director in Houston has got responsibility from that point on. And so we know that's a very dynamic environment and time frame. So that's why you don't hear any communications. We know what we're doing. We know what the ground launch sequencer is doing. We know what the onboard flight computers are doing, and we know where that responsibility switches. And it's seamless because we built it in. We train to it, and we talk to it, and we work through it. So that in a nutshell, that's kind of where handoff and handover happens. It's a silent handover for sure.
And what is it like in launch control after that occurs? Like, obviously, you don't just, oh, we're done, time to go. There's still a lot happening. It's still an active range and launch pad and everything. What's that next bit of time like inside control?
So we're really focused on two things. We're paying attention to the vehicle in flight. And as you mentioned, we still have an active and hazardous launch pad that we need to maintain and deal with and get into a safe configuration so we can do all of our post-launch operations. But in the very early parts of the of ascent, the team is just focused, and the team has data. They have the data coming down from the vehicle, so they're monitoring all of their systems that they've been monitoring just to see how they're performing from a flight vehicle perspective, and really it's you're so focused on looking at all of your requirements up until T0. The team in the control room, for the most part, then has that opportunity to turn their heads and look out the window. And the great thing about Firing Room 1 and all the launch capable control rooms throughout the history of the Launch Control Center, the big windows on the east side of the building go very high. They're very high windows. And what that really allows for is everybody in the room, even the person that's in the console position all the way at the back of the room, they can see the vehicle in flight from the back of the room. And if you didn't have those high windows and the configuration of those control rooms, they would never see it. It would be the ceiling would block it, whatever. But everybody in that room can see the vehicle flying with their own eyes out the windows, and that's a really great feeling to see with your own eyes, not on a television monitor, but with your own eyes. And it really does. It is a significant payoff for all the hard work. And then ultimately, we're just patiently waiting for the same milestones that the whole rest of the world is looking for, right? Getting to main engine cut or booster separation, getting to main engine cutoff, getting to the separation events, the ICPS firing and all of those operations, solar panel deploy, all of those major milestones in the mission. We're fans just like everybody else, seeing how the vehicle performs on that mission, and cheering on the flight control team and the flight director in Houston for their aspects of the mission. And then we're just ready, patiently waiting for the recovery side and getting our teams ready for that. So that's kind of, I don't know. I think I answered your question. Hopefully that hit the mark.
Absolutely. I love hearing the real, you can hear the emotion and the excitement from you of being in there, but also just the respect and everything that you have of that, and the history of that room, but the respect for your team and everything. It is so much of a team effort. Not, I would say, more maybe the most formal question. I'm assuming you've been through the Saturn V pre-show at the visitor center. It has that moment in launch control with the windows and everything. Have you been through it recently? And now, having been through SLS, what is there a difference? How is it similar? I'm not even sure I'll include this.
So I haven't recently been there, but I guess what my small memory of it is that it really kind of like it gives you the feeling of what you would think it was like in the room. The one thing, I don't know that I would include this part either, but I'll share this with you. The one difference, I've been in the LCC and in firing rooms for launches for a long time. For this launch, I felt the floor vibrating. I've never felt that before. The windows shake. There's there's echoing off of the vehicle assembly building. It's kind of like, it's a pretty eerie sound. It's kind of like a screeching kind of noise. But this is the only launch that I've ever been in the building that the floor shook. And that was when I think of like my senses, that was the one that when I think back to those moments, that tactilely, that's the one thing that resonates with me, is that I could feel the vibration in the floor. So
that's cool. I might find a way to use that even in a teaser, because that's a cool experience to hear. Because same thing, we were outside 3 miles away, and we had cameras on us documenting watching it, and you could see the doors behind us and the windows rattling and bouncing. And it's called Feel the Heat for a reason, but to actually to be that close, it's a powerful rocket. Looking forward now, Artemis 2 and beyond, we're hopefully just a couple months away from finding out our crew for Artemis 2. What's the journey like now? Are you staying in launch control as assistant director? And what changes might we see come in launch control? What's that journey like to Artemis 2 now?
So we've got a good number of activities that we need to go work on. Artemis 1 really did do a lot of things. It built that huge foundation, all of that 10 years of work to get to that first launch. That's a huge load. That is and you're doing all of it for the first time. Well, now we've got that foundation, and as I mentioned before, now we're going to build onto that foundation. We're going to add capabilities. We're going to add requirements that we need to go fulfill. The massive and most important one is that we are going to fly a crew on Artemis 2. So across the board, whether it's on Orion, all of the systems that the flight crew need, those are going to be new systems and we have ground systems that tie to those flight systems, and we're going to have to test all of those, and we're going to have to put procedures together for all of those. We're going to have to do all of that forward thinking about those capabilities and where we could have issues and what reaction we would have to those. We've got to build training for the flight crew, all of the things they need to know about all of the ground operations, everything that they will be doing during launch countdown. We've got a new crew transportation vehicle that we're partnered with Canoe, and they're working to go deliver those new vehicles, which will be exciting, and folks will get to see those. We've got new capabilities out at the launch pad, our emergency egress system, which is there for emergencies for the flight crew, for them to be able to quickly get away from the mobile launch, the vehicle and the mobile launcher. That's all in work and under construction. Our launch team will add some members because of the new systems and the crew related activities and support. So there will definitely be a lot of differences, but the great thing about it is that core, that foundation, as I keep calling it, is still is there, and it really does allow us to put a whole bunch of effort into these new things to make sure that they've got the same focus and the same development and rigor put into them that we've done all the way up to this point that we moved through Artemis 1. And there are lessons learned from Artemis 1 that we need to go implement, things that we said, hey, this worked, but how can we do it better? Is there a better way to implement this particular item? And for me, our assistant launch director is the same job I've got now. So it just adds to it their capabilities and procedures and development that that Charlie's going to ask me to go work on and help bring to fruition. And you know, it's exciting to be back in the business of working with the flight crew, having a crewed mission, because Artemis 1 was fantastic. I've been a part of crewed missions through in shuttle, and that was really a really satisfying aspect of the job. It's great that that's back into the mix, and we've been working on Artemis 2 for years as well, right? In parallel with Artemis 1. So now we get to focus on it 100%. That's our next thing, and that's exciting. And really, it started about a week after the Artemis 1 launch. We were right back at it and getting deep into the Artemis 2 content. We've got to go work, and it's carried till today, and we're going to keep that work going and push through it and get ourselves ready to launch Artemis 2 when we're ready.
Well, that's with commercial launches becoming so regular now, and Artemis bringing the moon kind of back into reach. I know when Artemis and Orion was flying, looking at the moon was just a little bit different, knowing we had a spacecraft around it. There's a new generation that is now looking to space as an option, an industry that they can work in, and now the moon and eventually soon to be Mars as places that we're going to be expanding and opening up opportunities for commercial and government work. What would you say to those that are in school, are graduating? What advice or encouragement would you give to them on how they should go forward in their future and maybe consider space being part of that?
Well, you know, the path that we've been on, and I talk about this, the evolution that we have gone through from a NASA perspective. Really, each and every building block along the way, Apollo demonstrated that we could do these amazing things. We can go to the moon. The space shuttle program and the International Space Station demonstrated that we can live in space for long durations. We can build these massive structures in space in low gravity environments. And so now Artemis is taking all of those lessons and taking them to go back to the moon, to be there on a permanent basis, so that we can learn lessons from that, so we can take that next step and go on to Mars. And the reason I kind of think about it in that way is that, you know, the commercial capabilities are an absolutely essential piece of our ability to go to the moon and be there permanently. And so when you look across NASA's methods and plan for the Artemis campaign, it employs what I'm focused on, the SLS Orion rocket that is carrying the crew, is carrying massive amounts of cargo as we move forward. It is the game-changing capability that allows us to send a lot of cargo, a lot of capability all in one mission. Whereas there are lots of other aspects that we need to put in place before we send a crew, before we are ready to go be permanently resident on the moon surface. and the commercial capabilities are perfect for that, and being able to be that the holistic approach to the success of this mission long term. And so that's how I look at it. That's the way that our agency is employing it. And it's not just here in the US, it is a worldwide, you look at the Artemis Accords and all of the countries that have signed on to be a part of that. It really is a worldwide approach. And I think that's exciting. And the great thing about it is space, folks might think about it like I've got to be a rocket scientist to go be a part of it. When you look across, and I look across the breadth of people and skill sets that I work with on a day-to-day basis, it ranges everything of everyday life, whether it's lawyers, doctors, right, security personnel, firefighters. There are aspects, and there are rocket scientists. There's extremely smart people, but to do the job that we do and to take on the mission that we've taken on, it takes a wide range of resources and skill sets. And so I would just encourage folks to think about, do I want to be a part of this mission that's going to take us to permanently be on the moon and then go to Mars? That is a huge reach. That is a huge opportunity. That is exploration. That is what NASA's all about. And that's why I'm doing this job. Those are the things that get me excited. And if you just are interested in that mission, you can bring your skill set to that mission and apply it appropriately in many different ways. And so just put it on your radar. It's an exciting opportunity to be a part of. And just because you're not a rocket scientist doesn't mean that you can't be a part of the team. And just to add to that, learn how to be a part and to work with and to help develop teams. That is so important to me. You've heard me say it many times through this. That is how we work through problems. That is how we work through these very complex and integrated operations. It's a great skill set to learn and to carry with you, because you can use it everywhere in your everyday life. Be open to be a part of teams and learn how to do that. That would be my couple of pieces of personal advice.
That's fantastic. You hit the nail on the head. If we can't work together as a team and bring everybody in as part of that team, we're not going to be able to do this successfully, and not near as quickly as it seems like we're going for it, getting permanent base on the moon. Well, I want to respect your time and wrap up. We've got one last kind of question. I'd love to invite you back maybe for an interview for our Behind the Console series, where we dive a little bit more into the people of what space means to them and their journey of kind of discovering the space industry. But what does space mean to you? What does Artemis mean to you, to wrap us up?
So I kind of touched on it. I really, the exploration aspect of this work, the pushing our boundaries, pushing the limits to find and go to places that either we haven't gone to before, or if we've been there before, be there in a more permanent way, learn, and that just excites me. That's always been something that is, even as a kid, I grew up in the start of the Star Wars era. And so just the movies and everything about that is really ingrained in my upbringing. And, from a family perspective, I've got my dad worked for Honeywell on the space shuttle main engine controllers. So there's some NASA history there. My older sister, Jennifer, worked out here at the Kennedy Space Center on the space shuttle program. She now works for Lockheed Martin on the Orion program. So there's some very built into my DNA that I'm involved in this kind of work. And so that's a little bit of my personal history. And it just it's always been, I've known since I was a little kid, this was the kind of work I wanted to be a part of. Obviously, probably thought I was going to be an astronaut at a point in time, but this really is exactly where I wanted to be, and I'm blessed and thankful that the opportunities have put themselves in front of me, and I've gotten a chance to go do this work.
I think that's where we all started. I'm going to be an astronaut. And then we found maybe a little bit more realistic way to actually get to be part of it. But as you said, it takes everyone to actually be able to be one small cog in that big wheel that makes it actually possible for our astronauts to go do what they do. But Jeremy, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate your insights into everything Artemis 1, and now looking forward to the future. We wish you and your team the best through this next couple of years. It's going to be a busy time getting ready for that crew to launch, and we're excited to follow that journey along and maybe follow up with you just prior to launch.
That sounds great. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, and looking forward to talking with you in the future.
Thank you so much.